explosive anonymous op-ed that was written about Donald Trump's administration and how there is a resistance against Donald Trump within his own administration. Now there are calls for an investigation by the Justice Department to figure out exactly who within the administration wrote this op-ed for the New York Times. Now, Trump had said this in a statement while speaking to reporters. This was during an interview on Air Force One that was originally off the record, but at the end, Trump decided, no, on the record. So let's hear what he has to say about the New York Times and the DOJ getting involved in this investigation.
Do you think Jeff Sessions should be investigating who the author of the op-ed piece was or who somebody's
I think so, because I think it's national security. I would say Jeff should be investigating who the author of that piece was, because I really believe it's national security.
So he said, I would say Jeff Sessions or Jeff should be investigating who the author of that piece was, because I really believe it's national security.
Do you know who asked that question of Trump?
I don't know who asked that
question.
Because
it seemed like, I mean, I don't know the context before that, but it felt from the brief clip like they were putting it in his head. Like, was that something he'd been talking about, or? He
had talked about it previously. So to give you an example, he was telling a crowd recently, this is before the Air Force One interview, that he thinks that there should be an investigation. In fact, we have that clip for you. Let's take a look at that.
He was, nobody knows who the hell he is, or she, although they put he, but probably that's a little disguised. That means it's she. But for the sake of our national security, the New York Times should publish his name at once. I think their reporters should go and investigate who it is. That would actually be a good scoop. That would be a good scoop.
To be absolutely clear, in this case, he's not saying that the DOJ should go investigate it. He's saying that New York Times reporters should investigate the New York Times.
They are, they should.
Yeah.
It's a great story,
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. They said he, so it's obviously she.
Very
why?
stable genius.
Okay, they said it was a person, so it's obviously a little person. I'm not buying it. I have it all figured out. Now, one of the reasons that people are asking about national security, to Joel's question, is because he's saying that the person should be arrested and that the New York Times should turn them in, right? So, well, why would they be arrested? They didn't leak national security issues at all. We all read the op-ed. We covered it for you guys here on the Young Turks, and there was no national security in there at all. All there was the president's an idiot, and the cabinet was considering the 25th Amendment because he's mentally unstable, and we're trying to make sure that he doesn't blow up the world. But he has to invent a reason for why they should be arrested, hence the conversation about national security.
Well, national security, actually, and he talked about this on Air Force One as well, not to go tangential, but he's used national security every single time he wants to do something, because in his mind, I use the term loosely, in his mind, he's like the CEO of Washington, and so everyone works for him, and so everyone can work for him, but he needs a reason. That's national security. So that's one thing. That's forgetting things like the First Amendment and the ability of someone to write, and the New York Times to print. And the New York Times is not exactly a fly-by-night little operation. I mean, they do check facts. There is a real person, and that real person has the ability to produce a real story and to choose or not to choose to be anonymous, whether or not it's a he or a she or little or tall. She makes it for people. So I'm just wondering what Trump has found out so far, because we're talking like Kellyanne, Ivanka, Melania.
Yeah.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Melania wouldn't count.
That's true. She's not an official advisor. Yeah. Although if we're running down the list, he's had high turnover. She could be, but yes, true, not yet.
Not yet.
All right.
Yeah, if you read that op-ed and how the person's talking about being a lifelong Republican and first principles of free markets, etc., they want him alive.
Kellyanne.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, I'm leaning toward Kellyanne. Again, this is just us speculating over who it could possibly be.
But
I mean, Kellyanne's husband is so vocal about his disdain for Trump. And I mean, you're not gonna be married to a dude that you disagree with that much on politics. You just can't. You can't do it. We live in a different world.
By the way, Ben and I had a draft for who the leaker is on Old School. Okay, we had a wraparound draft, and we picked the different officials. So check that out if you're a member, tyt.com/join, and you get all the shows, including Old School. Find out who I drafted first and who Ben. I was so mad at who we took second and third because they were such good picks. Okay, now here's my favorite quotes from this interview on Air Force One. when talking about his White House, he's like, oh, no, this whole talk of chaos and having to rein me in, it's not true. He said, it's a well-oiled machine. It's running beautifully.
No, you have to read the whole graphic because it's amazing. So this is the full statement. Go to graphic, or I'll read it for you. You don't have it in front of you. He says, so the New York Times reports, Washington Post reports, I apologize, asked if he trusts the White House staffers, Trump said, I do. But what I do now is I look around the room, I say, hey, if I don't know somebody, okay.
Nobody knows what that means.
We have so if he's now, before he would see people in the room that he wouldn't recognize, he wouldn't say anything. But now if he sees them, he says, hey, okay, great. He also says, we have a really well-run, smooth-running White House. It's a well-oiled machine. It is running beautifully.
Yeah, that's what well-oiled machines do. They turn on one another. And then they write New York Times op-eds anonymously, or as Trump would say in a recent rally, anonymously. And they say, hey, there's two tracks in this White House, the insane track, which is the president, and the sane track where we try to rein him in. That's what well-oiled machines do.
Yeah.
Well, he's had a 61% turnover in senior staff and a 37% turnover in regular staff being just in the last year. So if it were a well-oiled machine, it would have some issues.
Yeah, the well-oiled machines just are constantly dropping off different parts of the machine all the time, right? But there are more fun quotes. When asked about whether Gary Cohn took something, a document off his desk so he wouldn't sign it and cause trouble in the world, he said, Gary Cohn, if he ever took a memo off my desk, I would have fired him in 2 seconds. He would have been fired so fast, he would have been fired within the first second that it took place. Okay, so I like how he changed his mind in the middle. It went from 2 seconds, no, 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, second of all, schmuck, he obviously didn't take it off your desk while you were sitting there. Okay, he took it off when you weren't there. Otherwise, you would have noticed. Okay, so how would you know he took it off? Do you have some sort of powers we're not aware of? Now, the reality is, if you were a competent president and a competent manager, you would have noticed, hey guys, where was that memo I was gonna sign about South Korea? That was really important. But you didn't notice because you don't know anything.
But was he waiting? I was very confused by the whole thing. Is he waiting for South Korea to respond? Is he waiting for this policy to be enacted, or does he think it was enacted? Or is he just forgotten? I assume just forgotten, right?
I mean, it's unclear. It seems like he just forgot, and it seems as though this kind of thing happens often, not just when it comes to trade deals with South Korea, but also, fortunately in the context of Trump, in situations pertaining to like foreign policy. So one of the things that he wanted to do was just go in and assassinate Bashar al-Assad, and his aides, or I shouldn't say aides, his senior officials prevented that from happening by taking documents off his desk. So it's amazing how easily he can just forget about something as serious as assassinating a leader of any country.
But I haven't read the Woodward thing. Is it? I had heard that, or I'm sure it's just true. In the Nixon administration, he would, bark out crazy orders.
Yeah.
People wouldn't do them, and then he would thank them later. He's like, yeah, it was just. Is that what's going on? Or does Trump really think these were good ideas and they're going to be enacted? Or is he grateful that people aren't doing this?
No. So that's a great question, and that is the most similar case because senior administration officials for Nixon also said under certain circumstances they ordered the rest of the people in the administration to not follow his orders. For example, they said if he says to launch a nuke, do not launch the nuke. Part of the reason was, he had all these issues and he was depressed and he was in a bad state of mind. But the major issue was that he was heavily drinking. So they didn't want him making decisions while he was drunk. And that's why he would thank them later. But that's because Nixon was a bad guy, but he wasn't dumb. Everybody knows Nixon was smart, very devious, etc., but knew what was going on. So when he sobered up, he'd say thank you. Trump, on the other hand, is not only stupid, but has no sense of how stupid he really is.
And he's also an egomaniac, so he wants to feel like he's always in control. So, this idea of his officials really being the individuals in control of the policy that gets carried out, that would totally hurt his ego. He would lose his mind over that. Remember, if a member of his administration is getting more media coverage than he is, his feelings get hurt. It's unbelievable.
Well, I worked for Gary Cohn. It's interesting to me because I said many disparaging things about Goldman Sachs over the years and about Gary Cohn. But one thing I will say for him is if he wants to do something, he will get it done. So the fact that, well, we know Trump is not necessarily a truthful person, but the fact that Trump is even disputing that could have happened is just ironic, because he would have known that Gary Cohn would do what he said he was going to do, and particularly with respect to trade. I mean, that is why he ultimately quit, because all of the trade stuff that's going on from the Trump administration is ridiculous. All these tariffs aren't helping anyone. In fact, our deficit is higher.
It is. The trade deficit
in the last
is
5
higher
months
now, yes.
since he started to try to do the opposite.
Right.
So I just find that interesting that it was Gary Cohn's quote about that's been one of the ones highlighted in the Woodward book.
Yeah, but guys, so look, it's one thing if he forgets that he was supposed to sign something about South Korean trade, which is already disastrous. That I mean, you're the president of the United States. You're supposed to know. You're supposed to care. And so and you should be really mad if someone does not execute your orders, because that means that you're terrible at managing. They don't respect you, etc. So the fact that you don't notice that is unacceptable. But Anna's right. That's one thing. When you say kill Bashar al-Assad, the leader of another country, and General Mattis apparently on that call said, "We'll get on it right away, sir," and then he hung up and told his aide, "We're not doing any of that." Okay, so now he didn't. Trump, to be fair to him, he didn't hear what Mattis said after he hung up the phone. But
how do you forget?
How do you
forget?
No, did you not notice that Assad is not dead? That Assad is perfectly alive? Did you not notice that we never bombed Assad? That we never made that effort?
How dangerous is that for democracy?
Very dangerous.
When people that we didn't elect are going against the orders of the president of the United States. Like, I don't want to live in that world where these people think, without reporting to anyone on their own, decide what's good for America.
So
like, I didn't vote for Trump, but like people did.
You make a really good point. So I love that you brought that up, because this is something that I've been seeing, on an anecdotal level, and I'm glad to have someone in front of me saying the same thing. Because
are you glad it's me?
Are
you glad it's me?
I am glad that it's you.
Good. Right,
I am glad that it's you, because you're proving a point that I was making on the show recently, that this op-ed is important, and I'm glad that it got published, because I think the American people deserve to know what's going on within this White House. But at the same time, it has led to some individuals who would previously criticize Trump, who are critical of Trump. Now they're feeling like some level of sympathy for him, or it's backfiring in certain ways.
It's not sympathy, it's a belief in democracy over my hatred of Trump,
I think the problem with Trump, though, is that he's not a believer in our democratic system.
But we have to be. He can't let us all turn on democracy. Then we go straight to fascism. Like
no, I agree with you, but I feel like he would carry out fascist policies if it weren't for, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I remember when he chose Mattis, to be in his cabinet, I was like, oh, this is not good news. And now all of a sudden we're in this situation where I'm like, oh, I'm so glad Mattis didn't go out and execute or assassinate Bashar al-Assad. So look, it depends on the person and whether or not the person who was elected is mentally competent. I'm not saying this just to insult Trump. I genuinely question his competency. I'm worried that if he carries out the things that he...
But who gets to make that decision?
Yeah, it's a scary situation.
There's a literal answer to that question. And that goes to the very, very core of this issue. In all seriousness, so I'm with you, Joel. I think it's terrible that they're not following the president's orders. We talked about it earlier in the week. If Bernie Sanders was president and some former Clinton and Obama staffers are like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable, unacceptable. But why? Why are they not following his orders? Because they believe that he is mentally unstable. That is why they're not following the orders. So for example, Bashar al-Assad's a really bad guy. Why are we saying it's a good thing they didn't kill him? Because it would have created chaos and instability. We might be at war with a major nuclear superpower like Russia if we had killed Assad, let alone Iran, etc.
But we have a system to deal with an unstable president.
Exactly.
And our Congress and our Senate have decided he's not unstable. And that's the way the system is supposed to work.
No, actually, so that's what I was going to get to. The literal answer to who gets to decide is the cabinet. And so the person who wrote the op-ed in the New York Times said the cabinet early on did consider the 25th Amendment, which says that the president is mentally incompetent to rule, and we need to replace him. if they are not following his orders, then they should do their constitutional duty to do it the right way and to convene the cabinet and have a discussion about whether to use the 25th Amendment or not. You're right, Joel. Doing it this way isn't the right way to do it.
And it's not sympathy for Trump. He hired these people. It's not like they came from the deep state. They're the people he chose.
Yeah,
but that's
it's not
why,
sympathy for him.
and I agree. The better way to do any of this is to do it officially, to do it by the Constitution, to do it by what our congressional legislation says. But the thing about this op-ed, however, is it just indicates how bad things really are, which we know. But coming from inside the White House, not one of the 61% of his senior officials that left, but someone who's actually still there saying, hey, you know what? This needs to be, this is like a cry out. This is a shot from us. And I think in that respect, using the press, which has been something that's been used by journalists, by all of us, and et cetera, to cry out to the public, to take that extra step, and even to Congress, and to give them that sort of backing like you're talking about, I think that is important.
I don't mind the crying out. I don't even necessarily mind the anonymity. What I mind is subverting the president in a very undemocratic way.
Yeah, I think we actually all agree to that. And so, and I can't stand Donald Trump, but I don't think you should subvert him in a way that isn't constitutional or legal. So for God's sake, do the right thing. Now, the 25th Amendment is not like impeachment. Impeachment is a political process, and it often is engaged by the opposite party, as they did to Bill Clinton. Now, it might be legitimate, as has happened in the past. Threats of it might be legitimate, as it happened with Nixon. It might be illegitimate, depending on your opinion, with Clinton. But it is a political process. The 25th Amendment is your own cabinet, the president's own cabinet getting together and saying, and it could be for a number of reasons. He could have been, there could have been an assassination attempt. For a while, Ronald Reagan was incapacitated when he was shot. There's a lot of different reasons. But 25th Amendment is more permanent, obviously. So where you convene the cabinet, as you say, the president is literally not mentally competent to lead, we must remove him from office, not for politics, but for the sake of the country, because he doesn't have the capacity to make these decisions. And apparently, according to the Woodward book, and now this insider, a very senior administration official, coming into the New York Times and saying, yes, there are a lot of us inside the cabinet and inside the government who think he is not mentally stable enough to lead this country. That's why we ignore his orders. Then do your job, convene the cabinet, consider the 25th Amendment. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.